The blood on her sleeve had dried to a rust-colored stain that matched the Arizona dust. But Vincent Rourke noticed it anyway, because he made it his business to notice things other men overlooked. He was watering his horse outside the Mercantile in Fort Yuma, California, on that scorching afternoon in July of 1878, when she stepped down from the stagecoach, moving like something fragile that had learned to pretend it was made of iron. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair pinned severely back from a face that might have been beautiful if it were not so carefully blank. Her traveling dress was modest, high-necked despite the heat, and she held herself with the kind of stillness that Vincent recognized from his years tracking outlaws across 3 territories. It was the stillness of prey trying not to be seen. The stagecoach driver hauled down a single worn trunk, and she paid him with coins she counted out carefully from a small purse. Her hands trembled slightly, and when she reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, her sleeve slipped back just enough. Vincent saw the finger-shaped bruises circling her wrist like a bracelet of violence, purple and yellow and green in various stages of healing. She caught him looking. Most men would have glanced away, pretended they had seen nothing, gone about their business with the comfortable ignorance that let them sleep at night. Vincent Rourke had never been most men. He held her gaze steadily, not with pity or prurience, but with a simple acknowledgement that said, "I see what was done to you, and I will not pretend otherwise." Her eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing her carefully composed features. She yanked her sleeve down and grabbed the handle of her trunk, struggling to lift it. Vincent tied his horse to the rail and crossed the dusty street in 4 long strides. "Let me help you with that, miss," he said quietly. "I can manage." Her voice was low, cultured, with the remnants of an Eastern education smoothing out her vowels. "I am sure you can," Vincent replied, "but you do not have to." She looked at him then, really looked at him, taking in his weathered face and the lines around his blue eyes that came from squinting into too many sunsets. He was 30 years old, lean and tall, with dark blonde hair and the kind of hands that were equally comfortable with a gun or a bridle or a book. There was something in his face that must have reassured her, because after a long moment, she released the trunk handle. "Thank you," she said carefully. "Where are you headed?" "The boarding house. Mrs. Chen's establishment, if it still exists." "It does. I will walk you there." Vincent lifted the trunk easily and started down the wooden sidewalk. After a moment's hesitation, she followed. Fort Yuma sat at the confluence of the Colorado and Gila rivers, a dusty outpost that served as a way station for travelers and traders moving between California and Arizona territory. The air shimmered with heat, and the few people on the street moved slowly, conserving energy in the afternoon furnace. Vincent's boots thudded hollowly on the wooden planks. "I am Vincent Rourke," he said after they had walked half a block in silence. "I run a horse ranch about 5 miles north of town." She did not offer her name immediately, and he did not push. They passed the saloon where someone was playing a mournful tune on an out-of-tune piano, and the land office shuddered against the heat. "Miriam," she said finally. "Miriam Oakes." "Welcome to Fort Yuma, Miss Oakes, Mrs. Oakes." The correction was automatic, but he heard the bitter edge beneath it. Vincent filed that information away and said nothing. They reached Mrs. Chen's boarding house, a sturdy adobe building with a covered porch and actual glass windows, a luxury in this part of the territory. He set the trunk down carefully. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Rourke." Miriam's tone was dismissive, the words of someone trying to close a door. "I come to town most Saturdays for supplies," Vincent said. "If you need anything, you can leave word at the Mercantile. Tom Walsh, the proprietor, knows where to find me." "That will not be necessary." Probably not, Vincent agreed. He touched the brim of his hat and turned to go, then paused. But the offer stands anyway. He walked away before she could respond, back toward where his bay gelding waited patiently in the shade. He could feel her eyes on his back, confused and wary. Good. Wariness meant she was still fighting, still had something left inside her that had not been beaten down completely. Vincent had come to California 5 years ago with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and a determination to build something that belonged to him alone. The ranch had started as a lean-to and a dream, but he had good instincts with horses and better instincts with land. Now he ran 50 head of horses and employed 2 ranch hands, Mexican brothers named Carlos and Diego, who asked few questions and worked harder than any men he had ever known. He made his other purchases at the mercantile, flour and coffee and ammunition, and listened to Tom Walsh gossip about the new arrivals in town. A family from Missouri had taken over the old Peterson place. A gambler had set up semi-permanent residence at the saloon. And a young woman had arrived on the afternoon stage, alone, which was unusual enough to be remarked upon. "Seems like she is running from something," Tom said, weighing out nails. "Had that look about her, you know, like a deer that has been chased by wolves." "Or caught by them," Vincent said quietly. Tom glanced at him sharply. "You met her then, helped her with her trunk. She is staying at Mrs. Chen's." "Alone?" Tom shook his head. "That will set tongues wagging. A married woman traveling without her husband, taking up residence in a boarding house. People will talk." "People always talk," Vincent said. He paid for his supplies and loaded them into his saddlebags. "Does not make it any of their business." He rode home as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. The land here was harsh but honest. It would kill you if you were careless, but it never lied about what it was. He preferred that to the duplicity of so-called civilization, where violence wore a respectable face and cruelty hid behind closed doors. At the ranch, Carlos met him at the stable. "The sorrel mare foaled," he reported. "A colt, strong legs, good chest. Diego is with them now." Vincent checked on the new foal, approved its conformation, and made sure both mother and baby were settled for the night. Then he went into his small house, made himself a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, and tried not to think about finger-shaped bruises and frightened eyes. He failed. 3 days later, he found himself riding into Fort Yuma on a Wednesday morning with no particular excuse except that he needed to check on a saddle he had ordered. It was a flimsy pretense and he knew it, but he went anyway. He saw Miriam outside the dry goods store, examining bolts of fabric with Mrs. Chen, a formidable Chinese woman who had come to California during the gold rush and stayed to build an empire of property and influence. Mrs. Chen was speaking animatedly, gesturing at a particularly cheerful calico print, but Miriam's face remained carefully neutral. She wore a different dress today, still high-necked despite the heat, still covering every inch of skin it could. But Vincent saw how she held her left arm slightly stiff, how she winced when Mrs. Chen touched her shoulder in a friendly gesture. He did not approach them. Instead, he conducted his business at the saddlery and was about to head back to the ranch when he saw a man ride into town on a lathered horse. The man was well-dressed, with the look of money and eastern cities about him. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and the kind of face that would be called distinguished in a tintype portrait. Vincent watched him rein in outside the boarding house and dismount. The man moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He strode up to the porch and knocked sharply on the door. Mrs. Chen appeared and Vincent was too far away to hear their conversation, but he saw Mrs. Chen shake her head firmly. The man's posture became aggressive, his gestures sharp. "Mrs." Chen stood her ground, arms crossed, and finally pointed back toward the street. The man stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the saloon. Vincent urged his horse forward and intercepted Mrs. Chen before she went back inside. "Mrs. Chen, a moment please." She turned, her expression guarded. She was perhaps 50, though her exact age was a mystery, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Rourke, what can I do for you?" The man who just left. "Do you know him?" "He says he is Mrs. Oakes' husband. Came looking for her, Mrs." Chen's mouth thinned to a hard line. "I told him I did not know anyone by that name, but he saw her in town. Perhaps he did. But Mrs. Oakes is renting a room in my establishment, and I do not give out information about my tenants to anyone, husband or not." She fixed Vincent with a penetrating stare. "Especially when that tenant arrives covered in bruises she thinks her sleeves hide." Vincent felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "She has an ally in you then. She has a locked door and my word that no one enters without her permission." "Beyond that, Mr. Rourke, I am not sure what anyone can do. The law gives husbands certain rights over their wives, rights that most judges will uphold regardless of how those rights are exercised. The law is not always just." "No," Mrs. Chen agreed. "It is not." She studied him for a moment. "You have an interest in Mrs. Oakes. I have an interest in seeing that she is safe. Those are not always the same thing. Sometimes safety requires more than interest. It requires action, and action can have consequences." "I have never been afraid of consequences," Vincent said, Mrs. Chen smiled slightly. "I believe you have not, but Mrs. Oakes is not your responsibility, Mr. Rourke. Whatever you imagine you can do for her, make sure you consider what she wants, not just what you think she needs." It was a fair warning, and Vincent acknowledged it with a nod. He rode back to the ranch but found himself unable to settle into his usual routines. He worked with the horses, breaking a young stallion to saddle, mending fence line, checking the water tanks. But his mind kept circling back to Fort Yuma, to a woman with careful eyes and hidden bruises, to a well-dressed man with the look of ownership about him. That night, he sat on his porch and watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The desert air cooled rapidly once the sun set, and he wrapped a blanket around his shoulders against the chill. Somewhere out there, coyotes were singing their strange, yipping songs. Closer in, his horses moved peacefully in their corral, dark shapes against the lighter darkness. He had told himself when he came to California that he was done with other people's problems. He had spent 3 years as a lawman in Colorado, and it had nearly killed him, not from bullets, but from the slow erosion of seeing what people did to each other and being powerless to stop most of it. He had walked away, built something clean and simple with his own hands, and told himself he would never again wade into the murky waters of human cruelty. But apparently he had lied to himself, because here he was, unable to stop thinking about Miriam Oakes and how he might keep her safe from the man who thought he owned her. Saturday came, as it always did, and Vincent rode into Fort Yuma with his regular list of supplies. He was loading bags of feed into his wagon when he saw Miriam walking quickly down the street, her head down, moving with purpose toward the general store. She glanced over her shoulder twice, the gesture furtive and frightened. Vincent tied off the last bag and followed at a discreet distance. She entered the general store, and he gave her a few minutes before he went in after her. She was at the counter, purchasing a small knife, the kind used for peeling vegetables or cutting twine. Her hands shook as she counted out the coins. The proprietor wrapped the knife in brown paper and handed it to her. She tucked it into her reticule and turned to leave, nearly colliding with Vincent. "Mr. Rourke." Her voice was startled, guilty, as if she had been caught doing something shameful. "Mrs. Oakes." "Forgive me, I did not mean to startle you. I needed." She trailed off, clutching her reticule close to her body. "Would you walk with me?" Vincent asked. "Just for a few minutes. There is something I need to say to you." She looked uncertain, her eyes darting toward the door. But finally, she nodded. They walked in silence to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrubland and the land stretched out toward the distant mountains. Vincent stopped in the shade of a twisted mesquite tree and turned to face her. "Your husband is in Fort Yuma," he said without preamble. "He came to Mrs. Chen's boarding house 3 days ago looking for you. She did not tell him you were there, but he may have seen you in town." Miriam's face went white. "How do you know he is my husband?" He told Mrs. Chen he was. "And I watched you just now, the way you kept looking over your shoulder. You are expecting to see him." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of protection that broke Vincent's heart a little. "I knew he would follow me. I hoped I had enough of a head start, but Henry is very determined when he wants something." "What does he want?" "Me, his property, his possession." Her voice was bitter. "I was foolish enough to marry him 2 years ago in Boston. He was charming, educated, from a good family. Everything my parents wanted for me. And for the first 3 months, he was everything I thought I wanted too. And then the mask came off." Miriam's eyes were distant, looking at something Vincent could not see. "The first time he hit me, he apologized so profusely, cried even, said it would never happen again. I believed him. By the 10th time, I stopped counting. By the 20th, I stopped believing there was anything I could do to prevent it." Vincent felt rage kindle in his chest, hot and righteous, but he kept his voice steady. "So you ran." "I took what money I could gather, waited until he went on a business trip and bought a ticket west. I thought if I could just get far enough away, start over somewhere he would never think to look." She laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "But Henry has resources, money, connections. Of course he found me. Mrs. Chen will not tell him where you are. He does not need Mrs. Chen. Fort Yuma is not a large town, Mr. Rourke. He will see me eventually, and when he does, he will drag me back to Boston and make sure I never have the chance to run again." She met his eyes, and he saw the desperation there, and beneath it, the faint ember of defiance that had not yet been extinguished. "I bought the knife because I will not go back. Do you understand? I will not go back, even if the only way to prevent it is to use that knife on myself. No." The word came out harder than Vincent intended. He took a breath and gentled his tone. "No, Mrs. Oakes, there are other options." "What options?" "The law is on his side. I am his legal wife. If he files a complaint, the marshal will help him take me back." "The marshal might try," Vincent said. "But Fort Yuma is at the edge of the law, not the center of it. Things are more flexible out here if you know how to bend them." "What are you suggesting?" Vincent had not planned this, had not thought it through, but the words came out anyway, clear and certain. "Come to my ranch. Work for me as a housekeeper. Mrs. Chen can spread the word that you left town, went north towards San Francisco maybe. Your husband will search for you, but he will not think to look at every ranch outside of town. And even if he does, he will be looking for his wife, not my employee." Miriam stared at him. "You would do that? Lie to my husband, harbor me, risk his anger?" "I would." "Why?" The question was raw, almost angry. "You do not know me. This is not your problem." "You are right," Vincent said. "I do not know you. But I know what I saw on your wrist, and I know the look in your eyes. I have seen that look before, in a different life, on the face of a different woman who thought she had no options left. I did nothing then because I told myself it was not my place to interfere between a husband and wife. She died 3 weeks later, fell down the stairs, the official story went, though everyone knew the truth. Miriam drew in a sharp breath. "I will not make that mistake again," Vincent continued. "So yes, I would lie to your husband, I would harbor you. I would risk his anger and anything else necessary to make sure you have a choice about your own life." The silence stretched between them, filled with the buzzing of insects and the distant sound of wagon wheels on hard, packed earth. Miriam's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "I cannot pay you," she said finally. "I have almost no money left. I am offering you employment, not charity. You would work for your room and board. I need someone to keep the house, do the cooking, maybe help with the chickens. My ranch hands are good men, but they cannot keep a house to save their lives. I do not know anything about ranch life. You will learn." Vincent smiled slightly. "I did not know anything about it either when I started. Turns out most things can be learned if you are willing to try." Miriam studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "All right, yes, I will come to your ranch. Get your things from Mrs. Chen's today. Tell her you are leaving town. I will have my wagon ready in an hour, and we will go together. By nightfall, you will be settled at the ranch, and by tomorrow the story will be all over Fort Yuma that you left. What if Henry does not believe it?" "Then I will deal with Henry," Vincent said grimly. "But one way or another, Mrs. Oakes, you are not going back to Boston." An hour later, Miriam's trunk was loaded in Vincent's wagon, and they were rolling north out of Fort Yuma on the road that led to the ranch. She sat beside him on the bench seat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who had hugged her tightly and whispered something in her ear that made Miriam smile, the first real smile Vincent had seen from her. The land opened up around them, vast and empty under the endless sky. The road was rough, rutted by wagon wheels and seasonal rains, but Vincent knew every inch of it. They rode in silence for the first mile, and then Miriam spoke. "Why did you come to California, Mr. Rourke?" "I needed a new start. The life I was living in Colorado was killing me slowly." "You were a lawman for 3 years. How did you know? The way you move. The way you watch everything. My father was a lawyer in Boston, and he had dealings with the police. You have that same awareness they do." Vincent nodded. "I was a deputy marshal in a silver mining town. It was violent work, and after a while the violence seeped into everything. I woke up one day and realized I could not remember the last time I had gone a full day without seeing someone hurt. So I resigned, sold everything I owned, and came west looking for something better." "Did you find it?" "I am still looking," Vincent admitted. "But the ranch helps. Horses are honest. They do not lie or pretend. If a horse trusts you, it is because you have earned it, and if it does not, well, that is usually your fault too." Miriam was quiet for a moment. "I used to paint," she said softly. "Before I married Henry. Watercolors mostly, landscapes and flowers. I was not particularly good at it, but I enjoyed it. Henry said it was a frivolous waste of time. He burned my paints and brushes 6 months after we were married." "Why?" "Because I had spent an afternoon painting instead of supervising the household staff to his exact specifications. He said I needed to learn priorities." Her voice was flat, but Vincent heard the grief beneath it. "When you are settled at the ranch, I will get you new paints," he said. "There is a merchant in Yuma who orders goods from San Francisco. We can have him bring whatever you need." She turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "You do not have to do that, I know, but the desert sunrise is worth painting, and it seems like a shame to waste it." They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning its descent. The buildings came into view gradually. The house, small but sturdy, built of adobe with a wooden porch, the barn and stables, the corral where the horses watched their approach with pricked ears, the bunkhouse where Carlos and Diego lived. Vincent helped Miriam down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was simple, 3 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, sparsely furnished but clean. He showed her to the smaller bedroom, which had a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "It is not much," he said, "but the door has a lock and you are welcome to use it whenever you want privacy." Miriam set her reticule on the bed and looked around the small room. "It is perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Rourke." "Vincent. If we are going to be living under the same roof, you should call me Vincent. Then you should call me Miriam," he smiled. "All right, Miriam. Let me introduce you to Carlos and Diego, and then I will show you where everything is in the kitchen. I should warn you, I am not a particularly fussy eater, and neither are the hands. Anything edible will be an improvement over my cooking." The evening passed in a flurry of introductions and orientations. Carlos and Diego were polite and respectful, accepting Vincent's explanation that Miriam was the new housekeeper without question. She toured the kitchen, took inventory of the supplies, and began to plan meals with the focused concentration of someone grateful for a task to occupy her mind. That night, after dinner, a simple but surprisingly good meal of fried chicken and biscuits that Miriam had somehow conjured from Vincent's meager pantry, they sat on the porch together. Carlos and Diego had retired to the bunkhouse, and the ranch was settling into its evening rhythms. The horses were shadows in the corral, and above them the stars were emerging in their thousands. "It is so quiet here," Miriam said. "In Boston there was always noise. Carriages, people, the factories. I had forgotten what quiet sounded like. Does it bother you?" "No. It is like breathing clean air after being in a smoky room for too long." She was silent for a moment, then said, "Vincent, what will you do if Henry comes here? Tell him the truth. You work for me and you are staying of your own free will. And if he does not accept that, then I will make it clear that he is not welcome on my land." "He can be dangerous," Miriam said quietly. "When he is angry, when he feels defied, he becomes something else, something cold and cruel." "I have dealt with dangerous men before," Vincent said, "and I am not easily frightened. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. I will not. But Miriam, you need to understand something. You are not a burden and you are not causing trouble by existing. What happened to you, what Henry did to you, none of that was your fault. You have nothing to apologize for." Her breath hitched, and in the starlight he saw tears on her cheeks. "I have been telling myself that for months," she whispered, "but I did not believe it until just now." Vincent reached over and gently took her hand. She flinched at first, an instinctive reaction, but then her fingers closed around his. They sat there in the darkness, holding hands like children, and Vincent felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening onto a room he had not known existed. The days settled into a rhythm. Miriam woke early and had breakfast ready for the men before they started their work. She cleaned the house, tended the vegetable garden, collected eggs from the chickens Vincent had not been bothering to keep properly. She was efficient and thorough, but more than that, she was present in a way that made the house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. Vincent found himself looking for excuses to come back to the house during the day. He needed a drink of water. He had to check on something in the shed. He wanted to see if there was any more of that bread she had baked. The excuses were transparent, and from the small smile Miriam sometimes gave him, she knew exactly what he was doing. They talked in the evenings after Diego and Carlos had gone to the bunkhouse. They talked about everything and nothing, books they had read, places they had been, dreams they had harbored and lost and maybe were finding again. Miriam told him about her childhood in Boston, the daughter of a prosperous lawyer, educated at finishing school, expected to marry well and maintain a gracious home. She had done exactly what was expected of her, and it had nearly destroyed her. Vincent told her about growing up in Missouri, the son of a farmer who drank too much and a mother who died too young. He told her about the war, though he had been too young to fight in it, how he had watched the men come home broken, and realized that violence always cost more than it promised. He told her about Colorado, about the Silver Town and the endless cycle of claim disputes and bar fights and bodies in the street. "I kept thinking I could make a difference," he said one evening. "I thought if I were fair, if I enforced the law equally, if I did not take bribes or look the other way, maybe I could make things better. But the law is only as good as the people behind it, and most people do not want justice. They want advantage. Is that why you left? Part of it. The other part was watching good people get ground down by bad ones, and realizing the badge on my chest could not protect them. The woman I mentioned, the one who died, she came to me twice asking for help. Her husband was beating her. Everyone knew it, but she had no proof that would stand up in court. I told her there was nothing I could do unless she pressed charges, and she was too afraid to do that. So I did nothing, and he killed her, and he got away with it because he claimed it was an accident." Miriam was quiet for a long time. "You cannot save everyone, Vincent. No, but I can try to save the ones in front of me." She looked at him then, her eyes dark and serious. "Is that what I am to you? Someone to save?" "No," Vincent said honestly. "You are someone who saved herself. I am just providing a safe place for you to land." The truth was more complicated than that, and they both knew it. With each passing day, Vincent found himself more aware of Miriam's presence. The way she hummed softly while she worked. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she laughed, tentatively at first and then more freely, when Diego told terrible jokes in his broken English. She was emerging from the shell of fear she had built around herself, and watching it happen was like watching a flower open toward the sun. He did not have a name for what he was feeling. It was not pity, which was too condescending, or protectiveness, which was too simple. It was something more fundamental, a recognition that she had become essential to his days, that the ranch felt empty when she was not in it, that he measured time by the moments he could spend in her company. 2 weeks after Miriam came to the ranch, Henry Oakes showed up. Vincent was working with a young filly in the corral when he saw the rider approaching. He recognized the well-dressed man immediately and felt his muscles tense in anticipation. He handed the filly's lead rope to Carlos and walked toward the gate. Henry dismounted with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no. He was tall, well-built, with the kind of handsomeness that came from good breeding and expensive tailors. His clothes were dusty from the ride but still obviously costly, and his boots were polished leather, impractical for ranch work. "Can I help you?" Vincent said, his voice neutral. "I am looking for my wife, Miriam Oakes. I was told she might have come out this way." "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" Henry's smile was smooth, practiced. "I have been searching for her for weeks. She left Boston without telling me where she was going, and I have been worried sick." "If your wife wanted you to know where she was, she would have told you," Vincent said evenly. Henry's smile froze. "So she is here." "I did not say that. You did not have to." Henry took a step forward. "Look, Mr. Rourke, I am sure Miriam has told you some story about why she left. My wife is fragile, emotionally unstable. She gets ideas in her head, dramatic notions that she has been mistreated. The truth is, I love her very much, and I only want to take her home where she can get the help she needs." "The kind of help that leaves bruises?" Vincent asked softly. Henry's expression hardened. "I do not know what lies she has told you, but I assure you, any injuries my wife sustained were accidental. She is clumsy, always tripping over her own feet, bumping into furniture. It is part of her condition, female hysteria. Her doctor in Boston has documented it extensively. She needs constant supervision, medical care. This foolish flight west has only made things worse. Vincent felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Mrs. Oakes is currently employed on this ranch as a housekeeper. She is here of her own free will, and she has expressed no desire to return to Boston. She is not well enough to make that decision, Henry said sharply. As her husband, I have the legal authority to take her home, with or without your cooperation. You have the legal authority to try, Vincent said. But this is my land, and I do not take kindly to people making threats on my property. Henry's face flushed with anger. Are you really prepared to defy me? Do you have any idea who I am, what kind of resources I can bring to bear? I can have the law on you for kidnapping, for interfering with a man's marital rights. I can make your life very difficult, Mr. Rourke. You can try, Vincent repeated, but you should know I am not easily intimidated and I do not respond well to threats. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, and Vincent saw the calculation in Henry's eyes. He was weighing his options, deciding whether Vincent was bluffing, whether he could be pushed or bought or frightened into compliance. Before he could speak again, the door to the house opened and Miriam stepped out onto the porch. She must have heard voices and come to investigate. When she saw Henry, she went absolutely still, her face draining of color. Miriam. Henry's voice changed instantly, becoming warm and concerned. Thank God, darling, I have been so worried about you. Please come here, let me take you home. No. The word was barely audible, but it carried clearly across the yard. Miriam, please, you are not well, you need help. I need to be away from you. Her voice was stronger now, and she walked down the porch steps toward Vincent. I am not going back to Boston, Henry, not now, not ever. Henry's mask slipped, and for a moment Vincent saw the cold rage beneath it. You do not have a choice, Miriam. You are my wife. You belong to me. I belong to myself, she said, and Vincent heard the steel in her voice. You beat me, Henry. You terrorized me. You made me afraid to breathe wrong in my own home. I will not go back to that. You are hysterical, Henry said, his voice turning sharp. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. I am saying no. I am saying I will not be your victim anymore. I am saying that if you try to take me by force, I will fight you with everything I have. Henry took a step toward her, and Vincent moved between them, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. I think you should leave now, he said quietly. This is not over, Henry said, his eyes fixed on Miriam. You are my wife and the law is on my side. I will get you back, one way or another. The law may be on your side, Vincent said, but we are not in Boston, Mr. Oakes. We are in California at the edge of the frontier, where the law is more of a suggestion than a rule. And I suggest you leave my property before I decide you are trespassing. Henry stared at him, his jaw tight with fury, then turned and mounted his horse. You have made a serious mistake, Mr. Rourke, both of you. He wheeled his horse around and rode off toward town, his back rigid with outrage. Vincent watched until he was out of sight, then turned to Miriam. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. Without thinking, he pulled her into an embrace and she collapsed against his chest, her shoulders heaving with silent sobs. It is all right, he murmured into her hair. You are safe. I will not let him take you. He meant what he said, Miriam whispered against his shirt. He will use the law against us. He has friends, influence. He can make terrible things happen. Let him try. I have faced down worse than Henry Oakes. She pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Vincent, you do not understand. Henry does not lose. He cannot tolerate it. If he decides that destroying you is the way to get to me, he will do it without hesitation. Then he will learn something new, Vincent said, because I do not lose either, not when it matters. That night, after Miriam had finally cried herself to exhaustion and retreated to her room, Vincent sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap. He did not think Henry would return tonight, but he was not taking chances. Diego came out of the bunkhouse and joined him, settling onto the porch rail with his own rifle. "Trouble?" Diego asked in his heavily accented English. "Maybe. That man who came today, he is Miriam's husband. He wants to take her back to Boston." Diego's face darkened. "She does not want to go." "No, then she does not go." Diego said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "This is your land, your house. No one takes what is yours. It is more complicated than that. The law says she is his wife, his property." Diego spat into the dust. "The law? What does the law know about what is right? My father, he worked land in Mexico for 40 years. Then one day, a man with papers from the government came and said the land was not his, it belonged to someone else. The law said my father had to leave. Was that right? No. So the law is sometimes wrong. You do what is right, Vincent. You keep her safe. Carlos and me, we help. That husband, if he comes back, he finds 3 men with rifles, not one." Vincent felt gratitude warm his chest. "Thank you, Diego. No need for thanks. Miriam, she is good. She feeds us well, she smiles at our jokes, she makes this place feel like a home. We protect what is ours, yes. Yes." The next morning, Vincent rode into Fort Yuma to see Marshal Tom Hewitt. The marshal was an old-timer who had worn a badge in 3 territories and survived long enough to develop both wisdom and caution. He listened to Vincent's story without interruption, his weathered face thoughtful. "So, Oakes is claiming his wife is mentally unfit and needs to be forcibly returned to Boston," Hewitt said when Vincent finished. "That is his story. The truth is, he has been beating her for 2 years and she finally found the courage to escape. You got proof of that?" "I have seen the bruises myself, fresh ones and old ones." Hewitt sighed. "Vincent, you know I have got sympathy for the woman's situation. But legally, a man has rights over his wife. If Oakes files a complaint, if he gets a judge to issue an order, I will have to enforce it. Even knowing what he has done to her, even then, the law does not care much about what happens behind closed doors between a husband and wife. It is not right, but it is the way things are." Hewitt leaned back in his chair. "That said, Fort Yuma is a long way from any judge who would take Oakes seriously, and I am not inclined to rush the paperwork if you understand my meaning. I appreciate that. But Vincent, you need to be careful. Men like Oakes, they do not like being defied. He has money and connections, which means he can cause trouble in ways you might not expect. Watch your back and watch Mrs. Oakes too." Vincent left the marshal's office with a sense of foreboding. Hewitt was right. Henry Oakes was the kind of man who would use every weapon at his disposal, and the fact that Vincent had humiliated him in front of his wife meant this had become personal. For the next week, things were quiet, almost eerily so. Miriam settled back into the ranch routine, though she was more subdued than before, jumping at sudden noises and checking the horizon constantly for signs of riders. Vincent stayed close to the ranch, sending Carlos into town for supplies instead of going himself. They were having dinner one evening, just the 2 of them on the porch, when Miriam said, "I have been thinking about leaving." Vincent's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Leaving? Going further west, maybe to San Francisco, somewhere big enough that Henry could not find me easily." "I am putting you in danger by staying here, Vincent. If I leave, Henry will follow me and you will be safe." "No," Vincent said flatly. "You cannot just say no. This is my decision." "You are right. It is your decision, but my decision is that I am not letting you face Henry alone. You are not running anymore, Miriam. Running did not work. He found you here, he will find you in San Francisco, and he will keep finding you until you have nowhere left to go. Then what do you suggest? She sounded tired, defeated. I cannot fight him. He has the law on his side, he has money, he has power. What do I have? You have me, Vincent said. He reached across the small table and took her hand. You have me, and Diego and Carlos and Mrs. Chen, and Marshall Hewitt, who will drag his feet on any paperwork that comes through. You have people who care about you, Miriam, people who see you as a person, not a possession. That has to count for something. Why are you doing this? She asked, and there were tears in her eyes. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, at the intelligence and strength and wounded courage in her face, and he knew he could not hide from the truth anymore. Because somewhere between watching you learn to smile again and listening to you talk about the things you dream of painting, I fell in love with you. Miriam's breath caught. Vincent, you cannot. I am married. I am broken. I am bringing nothing but trouble into your life. You are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference. He squeezed her hand gently. And I do not care about the trouble. I care about you. I care about the way you sing while you cook breakfast and the way you watch the sunset like you are memorizing it. I care about your intelligence and your courage and the fact that you have survived things that would have destroyed someone weaker. I do not know what to say, she whispered. Then do not say anything right now. Just know that you are not alone and you do not have to be afraid anymore. We will figure this out together. She looked at him for a long moment and then she leaned across the table and kissed him. It was tentative, uncertain, but it was also real. When she pulled back, she was crying. I did not think I could feel this way again, she said. I did not think I had it in me to trust anyone, especially a man. But Vincent, when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like maybe I could be whole again. You are whole right now, Vincent said. Henry made you believe you were broken, but that was a lie. You were strong enough to leave him, strong enough to cross half a continent alone, strong enough to start over in a strange place. That is not broken, Miriam. That is courage. They sat there in the gathering darkness, holding hands across the table, and Vincent felt something settle in his chest. He had spent 5 years trying to build a life that was simple and uncomplicated, a life where he did not have to care too much or risk too much. But Miriam had walked into his world with her hidden bruises and careful eyes, and suddenly, simple was not enough. He wanted complicated. He wanted messy. He wanted a life that included her laugh and her dreams and her presence beside him every day. The next morning, Henry made his move. Vincent was in the barn, checking on a mare that had thrown a shoe, when he heard horses approaching. He stepped outside and saw 3 men riding toward the ranch. Henry was in the lead, flanked by 2 rough-looking men who had the appearance of hired guns. Vincent felt his muscles tense and he whistled sharply. Diego and Carlos emerged from the corral, both carrying rifles. Henry reined in his horse 20 yards from the barn. Mr. Rourke. I have come for my wife. Mrs. Oakes is not leaving with you, Vincent said calmly. I have a writ from a judge in Los Angeles ordering her to return to my custody, Henry said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. She is mentally incompetent, a danger to herself. The law requires that she be placed under proper care. Let me see that writ. Henry rode forward and handed the paper to Vincent. It looked official, with a judge's seal and signature, but Vincent noticed it was dated only 3 days ago. Henry had worked fast. This says she is to be remanded to your custody for transport to a mental hospital in Los Angeles, Vincent read aloud. It does not say she has to go back to Boston. The hospital is a temporary measure. Once she is stable, she will return home with me. And if I do not hand her over, then you are in violation of a court order, which makes you a criminal. My associates here are licensed bounty hunters, authorized to enforce the order by whatever means necessary. The two men with Henry shifted in their saddles, their hands moving toward their guns. Vincent assessed them quickly. Professional fighters, competent but not exceptional. He could probably outdraw them both if it came to it, but gunplay was unpredictable, and he had Miriam to think about. Before he could respond, the door to the house opened and Miriam stepped out. She was carrying the small kitchen knife in her hand, holding it like a weapon. "I am not going," she said clearly. "Henry, you can waive all the writs you want, but I am not going with you. Miriam, please, I am trying to help you. You are trying to control me. There is a difference." She walked down the steps and stood beside Vincent. "I know what you did. You paid a doctor to say I am insane, paid a judge to sign that paper. It is all lies, Henry. I am not crazy. I am just tired of being afraid of you. You do not know what you are saying. The delusions have gotten worse. The only delusion I ever had was thinking you would change." Miriam's voice was steady, strong. "I am not going to a hospital, and I am not going back to Boston. If you try to take me by force, people will get hurt, and I do not think you are prepared for that." Henry's face darkened. "I am giving you one last chance, Miriam. Come with me now, and we can forget this ever happened. Refuse, and I will have no choice but to use force." "Then you will have to use force," she said. Henry nodded to his hired guns. They started to dismount, and Vincent drew his revolver in one smooth motion, cocking it and aiming it at Henry's chest. "Tell your men to get back on their horses," Vincent said quietly. "Right now." Henry went very still. Behind Vincent, he heard the metallic click of Carlos and Diego cocking their own rifles. The hired guns froze, hands hovering over their weapons. "You are making a serious mistake, Rourke," Henry said, his voice tight. "The only mistake would be letting you take her. Now I am going to count to 3, and then I am going to start shooting. 1. You would not dare. 2. Henry stared at him, and Vincent saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards. Finally, Henry jerked his head at his men. "Mount up." The two hired guns climbed back onto their horses, moving slowly and carefully. Henry gathered his reins, his face twisted with fury. "This is not over," he said. "That writ is legal, and I will enforce it. If not today, then tomorrow or the day after. You cannot guard her every minute of every day, Rourke. Eventually, I will get what is mine." "She is not a thing to be owned," Vincent said. "And I can guard her as long as it takes for you to accept that and leave." Henry wheeled his horse around and rode off, his hired guns following. Vincent kept his gun drawn until they were out of sight, then carefully uncocked it and holstered it. Miriam was shaking beside him. He turned and took the knife gently from her hand, then pulled her close. She buried her face in his chest. "He will be back," she whispered. He meant what he said. He will keep coming until he gets what he wants or until someone gets killed. "Then we need to make sure he does not get what he wants," Vincent said. He looked over her head at Diego and Carlos. "Thank you, both of you." "We do not let strangers take our people," Carlos said with a shrug. "But Vincent, he is right. He will come back, and next time maybe with more men. We cannot fight an army." "We will not have to," Vincent said, though he was not entirely sure he believed it. "Let me think." That evening, after Miriam had gone to bed, exhausted from fear and adrenaline, Vincent rode into Fort Yuma to talk to Marshal Hewitt again. The old lawman listened to his story, examined the writ Henry had presented, and shook his head. "It looks legitimate," Hewitt said. "Judge Morrison in Los Angeles has a reputation for being friendly to men with money. If Oakes paid the right people, said the right things, Morrison would sign anything. So Miriam has no legal recourse. Not much. She could fight it in court, but that would require traveling to Los Angeles, getting a lawyer, all of which costs money and time. And even if she won, there is no guarantee Oakes would not just get another judge to sign another order. There has to be something we can do. Hewitt was quiet for a moment, then said, "There might be one thing. If Mrs. Oakes were to divorce her husband, the writ would become invalid. A divorced woman is not subject to her former husband's authority. California allows divorce. It does, under certain circumstances. Cruelty is one of them. If Mrs. Oakes could prove her husband was cruel to her, she could petition for divorce. How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. She would need to file the papers, serve them to her husband, wait for a hearing, and Oakes would fight it every step of the way." Vincent felt frustration burning in his chest. "So we are back where we started." "Not quite. There is one other option, though you are not going to like it." Hewitt leaned forward. "If Mrs. Oakes were to remarry, her marriage to Oakes would be legally complicated. Bigamy laws would come into play, and it would be up to the courts to sort out which marriage was valid. That would buy you time, maybe enough time to get the divorce finalized. She cannot remarry while she is still married to Henry. Technically, no. But if she were to marry someone else and claim her first marriage was invalid due to duress or fraud, the courts would have to investigate. It could take years to sort out, and in the meantime, Oakes would have a much harder time enforcing that writ." Vincent stared at him. "You are suggesting I marry her." "I am suggesting it is an option. A complicated one, legally questionable, but an option nonetheless. And if the courts ultimately decide her first marriage was valid, then her second marriage would be annulled, and she would be back to being Mrs. Oakes, at least on paper. But Vincent, the law moves slowly. If you two were married, even under disputed circumstances, it would give her breathing room. It would give you legal standing to protect her. And who knows, maybe by the time the courts sorted everything out, Oakes would have given up and moved on." Vincent rode back to the ranch with Hewitt's words echoing in his mind. It was a desperate solution, legally dubious, potentially disastrous, but it might also work. It might give Miriam the time and space she needed to truly be free. The next morning, he found her in the kitchen, making breakfast. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she had not slept well. He waited until she had poured them both coffee, then said, "I talked to Marshal Hewitt last night. He had a suggestion." "What kind of suggestion?" "The kind that sounds crazy but might actually work." Vincent took a breath. "He said that if you were to remarry, it would complicate Henry's legal claim on you. It would buy us time to file for divorce, time for the courts to sort everything out, time for Henry to hopefully give up and leave." Miriam set down her coffee cup carefully. "You are talking about marrying me." "Yes, Vincent, we have known each other for less than a month, and I am still legally married to Henry. What you are suggesting is bigamy." "Technically, yes. But Hewitt thinks we could argue that your first marriage was invalid due to duress or fraud. It would create enough legal confusion to protect you while we figure out a permanent solution. And if it does not work, if the courts decide Henry is my legal husband, then we would have tried and failed, but at least we would have tried." "Miriam, I am not asking you to marry me because I think it is the perfect solution. I am asking because it might be our only option, and because I would rather fight for you in a legally questionable marriage than watch Henry drag you back to Boston." She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "You really would do that? Risk legal trouble, risk your reputation, risk everything you have built here for me?" "In a heartbeat," Vincent said simply. "Why, I told you last night I love you. And even if I did not, I would still do it, because it is the right thing to do." Miriam stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the horses in the corral. If I say yes, if we do this, you need to understand something. I do not know if I can be a real wife to you, Vincent. Henry did things, made me feel things about myself, and I do not know if I can ever fully heal from that. I might always be a little bit broken. You are not broken, Vincent said, standing and moving to stand behind her. You are wounded, and wounds heal. It might take time and it might leave scars, but that does not mean you are broken. She turned to face him, and he saw tears on her cheeks. I am so tired of being afraid. I am so tired of Henry having power over me. If marrying you would take that power away, even temporarily, even illegally, then yes. Yes, I will marry you. Vincent pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid and uncertain. I will keep you safe, he murmured into her hair. I promise. I know you will. They were married 3 days later in a quiet ceremony in Marshal Hewitt's office. Mrs. Chen served as witness, along with Diego and Carlos. Miriam wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Chen had altered for her, and Vincent wore his cleanest shirt and vest. There were no flowers, no music, no celebration, just two people making vows they hoped would protect one of them from the other's past. When Marshal Hewitt pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Miriam gently, carefully, aware that this was still so new and fragile for her. She kissed him back, her hand resting over his heart, and he felt something inside him settle into place. They knew Henry would hear about it. Fort Yuma was too small for secrets, and Vincent had not tried to keep the marriage quiet. In fact, he wanted Henry to know. He wanted Henry to understand that Miriam was no longer alone and unprotected, that any move against her was now a move against Vincent too. Henry showed up at the ranch 2 days later, alone this time, his face a mask of cold fury. You married her, he said without preamble. I did. While she was still married to me. That is bigamy, Rourke. I can have you arrested. You can try. But I have a marriage certificate signed by a marshal, and I am willing to argue in court that Miriam's marriage to you was invalid due to coercion and cruelty. That should be an interesting legal battle, especially when Miriam testifies about what you did to her. No one will believe her. She is hysterical, unstable. I have doctor's testimony to that effect. You have paid testimony from a doctor who never met her, Vincent corrected. I have a woman who can stand in front of a judge and show the scars you left on her body. Which testimony do you think will be more convincing? Henry's jaw clenched. You think you have one. You think you can just take what is mine and face no consequences. Miriam is not yours. She never was. She is a person, not a possession, and she has made her choice. She chose to leave you and she chose to marry me. Accept it and move on. I will never accept it. Henry's voice was low and venomous. I will make you pay for this, Rourke. I will destroy you, take everything you have, leave you with nothing. And when I am done with you, I will take Miriam back and she will learn what happens to women who defy me. Get off my land, Vincent said quietly. Now. Henry stared at him with naked hatred, then turned and mounted his horse. He rode away without another word, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. That night, Vincent and Miriam lay in bed, not touching, both staring at the ceiling. They had decided to share the larger bedroom, but Vincent had been clear that he would not pressure her for anything she was not ready to give. They were married on paper, but they were still learning how to be married in truth. He meant what he said, Miriam said into the darkness. Henry never makes empty threats. I know. I have ruined your life. No, you have not. You have complicated it maybe, but you have not ruined it. She rolled onto her side to face him. In the moonlight coming through the window, her face was pale and serious. Vincent, I need you to promise me something. If Henry finds a way to hurt you, if this gets too dangerous, I want you to walk away. Let me go back to him if it means keeping you safe. I am not making that promise, Vincent said, and you are not going back to him no matter what happens. You cannot just decide that. Watch me. He reached over and took her hand. Miriam, I have made a lot of mistakes in my life. I have let fear and caution keep me from doing the right thing more times than I can count. But I am not making that mistake with you. Whatever happens with Henry, whatever he tries to do to me or to us, we face it together. That is what marriage means. We have been married for 3 days. And I meant every word I said when I made those vows. Did you not? She was quiet for a long moment. I do not know what I meant. I was so scared, so desperate to escape Henry, that I am not sure I fully understood what I was agreeing to. But Vincent, these last few days being with you, feeling safe for the first time in years, I think I am starting to understand. I think I am starting to feel something real. What do you feel? Like maybe I could love you. Like maybe I already do a little bit, and it scares me because I did not think I was capable of that anymore. Vincent pulled her closer, and she came willingly, resting her head on his chest. He could feel her heart beating, could feel the way she gradually relaxed against him. You are capable of more than you know, he said softly. Henry tried to break you, but he did not succeed. You are still here, still fighting, still able to feel. That is not weakness, Miriam. That is strength. She did not answer, but her hand found his and held on tight. The next weeks passed in a kind of suspended tension. Henry did not return to the ranch, but Vincent heard through Marshal Hewitt that he was still in Fort Yuma, staying at the hotel, making inquiries, talking to lawyers. He was planning something, and Vincent knew it was only a matter of time before the next attack came. In the meantime, life on the ranch continued. Miriam settled into her role as Vincent's wife, and slowly, carefully, they began to build something real between them. They still slept in the same bed, but now they fell asleep holding hands. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Vincent taught her to ride, and she proved to be a natural, sitting tall in the saddle with a look of fierce joy on her face as the horse cantered across the open land. One evening, Vincent came home to find her painting on the porch, using the watercolors he had ordered for her from San Francisco. She was absorbed in her work, her face serene, and he stopped to watch her. She was painting the sunset, capturing the impossible colors that lit up the desert sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "It is beautiful," he said, and she looked up with a smile. "It is not quite right. I cannot seem to get the light exactly how it looks. It looks perfect to me." She set down her brush and stood stretching. "Vincent, I have been thinking about us, about this marriage." His heart clenched. "All right. When we got married, it was out of necessity. A legal maneuver to protect me from Henry. But I do not want it to just be that anymore. I want it to be real." "It is real to me," Vincent said carefully. "I know, but I want it to be real in every way. I want to be your wife, not just in name but in truth." She stepped closer to him. "I am still scared. I still have nightmares sometimes about Henry. But when I am with you, I feel like maybe I can heal, maybe I can be whole again, and I want to try." Vincent pulled her into his arms, and she lifted her face to his. He kissed her gently at first, then with more passion as she responded, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Are you sure?" Vincent asked. "I do not want to rush you, I am sure. I am tired of letting Henry's shadow control my life. I want to move forward, and I want to move forward with you." That night, they made love for the first time, and it was tender and careful and healing. Vincent was patient, attentive, making sure Miriam felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterwards she cried, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of finally letting go of the fear and shame that had been weighing her down for so long. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me. for not looking away, for not pretending you saw nothing when you saw the bruises. You saved me, Vincent, in more ways than you know. You saved yourself, he said. I just gave you a safe place to land. The trouble came, as Vincent knew it would, on a hot afternoon in late August. He was in town picking up supplies when he saw Marshal Hewitt hurrying toward him, his face grim. Vincent, we have a problem. Oakes has filed criminal charges against you, bigamy, kidnapping, and fraud. Judge Morrison issued a warrant for your arrest. Vincent felt ice form in his stomach. That is ridiculous. Miriam came to me of her own free will, and the bigamy charge is questionable at best. I agree, but Morrison does not care. He is in Oakes' pocket and he wants this prosecuted. There are 2 territorial marshals coming from Los Angeles to serve the warrant and take you into custody. When? Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Vincent, I am sorry. I know this is unjust, but my hands are tied. If they show up with a valid warrant, I have to cooperate. What happens if I resist? Then they will shoot you, and that will not help anyone. Hewitt put his hand on Vincent's shoulder. Go home. Be with your wife. When the marshals come, go with them peacefully. We will get you a lawyer, fight this in court. It is not over yet. Vincent rode back to the ranch, his mind racing. If he was arrested, if he was taken to Los Angeles and thrown in jail, Miriam would be alone and vulnerable. Henry would swoop in immediately, use the arrest as proof that Vincent was an unsuitable guardian, and take her back. Unless Vincent made sure that could not happen. He found Miriam in the house, and he told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each word. Henry planned this, she said when he finished. He is using the law as a weapon against you, just like I warned he would. I know, but Miriam, listen to me, I need you to leave. What? No, I am not leaving you to face this alone. You have to. If I am arrested, Henry will come for you immediately. But if you are not here, if no one knows where you are, he cannot find you. Where would I go? Diego has family in Mexico, in a village south of Tucson. He will take you there, keep you safe until this is resolved. It is only temporary, just until I can clear my name and come for you. Vincent, no, we are supposed to face this together. We are facing it together. I am facing the legal battle and you are staying safe. That is how we win. He took her hands in his. Please, Miriam. I cannot fight for us if I am worrying about whether Henry has gotten to you. I need to know you are safe. Tears streamed down her face. I do not want to leave you. I do not want you to leave either, but we do not have a choice. She pulled him close and kissed him desperately. Come back to me. Promise you will come back to me. I promise. No matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, I will come back to you. They left that night, Miriam and Diego riding south under the cover of darkness. Vincent watched them go until he could no longer see them, then returned to the ranch to wait for the marshals. They came 2 days later, just as Hewitt had warned. 2 hard-faced men with territorial marshal badges and a warrant with Vincent's name on it. He went with them peacefully, allowed them to bind his hands, rode between them on the long journey to Los Angeles. The jail in Los Angeles was hot and crowded and smelled of unwashed bodies and despair. Vincent was locked in a cell with 3 other men and told his trial would be in 2 weeks. He used his one allowed letter to write to a lawyer Hewitt had recommended, explaining the situation and asking for help. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Richard Graham, came to see him 3 days later. Your case is complicated, Graham said bluntly. The bigamy charge is legitimate on its face. You married a woman who was already married. The fact that her first husband was abusive does not invalidate that marriage legally. So I am going to jail. Not necessarily. I have been doing some research into Henry Oakes. He is not as clean as he pretends. There are rumors of business dealings that skirt the edge of legality, debts he has left unpaid, a former business partner who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. If I can dig up enough dirt on him, I might be able to pressure him to drop the charges. That could take weeks, or it could take days. It depends on how lucky I get. In the meantime, sit tight, keep your head down, and do not do anything that would make your situation worse. The days in jail crawled by with agonizing slowness. Vincent counted time by meals and the changing light through the high barred window. He thought about Miriam constantly, wondering if she was safe, if Diego had gotten her to his family, if Henry had somehow tracked her down. On the 8th day of his imprisonment, Graham returned with news. "I found something. Oakes has been embezzling from his family's company for years. His father covered it up to avoid scandal, but I found an accountant who is willing to testify if we can guarantee his safety. If we bring this to the prosecutor, we might be able to negotiate." "What kind of negotiation?" "You plead guilty to a lesser charge, pay a fine, and in return, the bigamy charges are dropped and Oakes agrees not to pursue his claim on Mrs. Oakes. It is not perfect, but it gets you out of jail and keeps your wife safe." "Do it," Vincent said without hesitation. Graham worked fast. Within 3 days, he had brokered a deal. Vincent pleaded guilty to fraud, paid a fine that nearly wiped out his savings, and was released from jail. The bigamy charges were dismissed, and Henry Oakes, facing exposure of his embezzlement, agreed in writing to relinquish all claims on Miriam and to grant her a divorce. Vincent left Los Angeles on a fast horse, riding hard for the border. He reached Diego's family village 4 days later, exhausted and dusty and desperately hopeful. Miriam was sitting outside a small adobe house, shelling beans with an older woman when Vincent rode up. She looked up, saw him, and the bowl of beans went flying as she ran to him. He caught her as she launched herself into his arms, and they held each other so tightly neither could breathe. "You came back," she sobbed against his shoulder. "I was so afraid you would not come back. I promised, did I not?" Vincent pulled back enough to see her face. "It is over, Miriam. Henry agreed to give you a divorce. You are free." "Free." She said the word like she did not quite believe it. "Free. He will not bother you again. I made sure of it." She started laughing and crying at the same time, and Vincent held her through it, feeling his own relief crash over him in waves. It was over. They had won. They stayed in the village for 2 weeks, resting and recovering, waiting for the divorce papers to be finalized and delivered. Diego's family welcomed them with open arms, and Vincent used the time to teach Miriam to speak basic Spanish and to marvel at how much she had changed since he first saw her stepping off the stagecoach in Fort Yuma. She was still the same person, but the fear that had shadowed her every movement was gone. She laughed freely now, smiled often, held his hand without flinching. When the papers finally arrived, official and legal and final, they celebrated with Diego's family. Then they rode back to California, back to the ranch, back to the life they had begun to build together. The ranch felt like home in a way it never had before. Miriam threw herself into making it truly theirs, planting a larger garden, painting murals on the walls of the house, filling the rooms with warmth and life. Vincent expanded the horse herd, hired another ranch hand, and began to build a name for himself as a breeder of quality horses. They were married again, properly this time, in a ceremony at Mrs. Chen's boarding house with half of Fort Yuma in attendance. Miriam wore a white dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn for her, and Vincent wore a new suit that itched but made Miriam smile. When they exchanged vows this time, they both meant every word, and when Vincent kissed his bride, the crowd cheered. That night, in their bed in the ranch house, Miriam traced the lines of Vincent's face with her fingers. "I never thought I could be this happy," she said softly. When I was with Henry, I thought I would spend the rest of my life afraid. And then I came to Fort Yuma and I saw you looking at me, really looking at me, seeing what I was hiding. You did not look away. You did not pretend you saw nothing. You saw my bruises and you decided to care. Of course I cared, Vincent said. How could I not? Most people do not. Most people find it easier to ignore things that make them uncomfortable. But you did not, and that changed everything. You changed everything, Vincent corrected. You were brave enough to leave, brave enough to start over, brave enough to trust me. That took more courage than anything I did. Maybe we were both brave. Maybe we saved each other. Vincent smiled and pulled her close. I like that better. The years that followed were good ones. Miriam's divorce from Henry was finalized, and he faded from their lives like a bad dream. She heard through a letter from her sister that Henry had returned to Boston in disgrace, his embezzlement exposed, his reputation ruined. Miriam felt pity for him, but no regret. She threw herself into her painting, and her watercolors of desert landscapes began to sell in San Francisco galleries. She sent money to Diego's family in Mexico, thanking them for their help, and they wrote back with news and blessings. Vincent's horse ranch flourished. His reputation for fair dealing and quality animals spread, and he found himself turning down more business than he could accept. He and Miriam worked side by side, building something that belonged to both of them. 3 years after they were married, Miriam gave birth to a daughter. They named her Clara, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. 2 years later, a son followed, strong and healthy, whom they named Samuel after Vincent's grandfather. The children grew up running wild across the ranch, learning to ride before they could properly walk, surrounded by love and safety and the wide open sky. Miriam painted them constantly, capturing every stage of their growing, and Vincent built them a tree house in the only tree big enough to support it, an old cottonwood by the creek. On summer evenings, they would all sit on the porch together, Vincent and Miriam in rocking chairs, the children playing at their feet. Miriam would paint while Vincent read aloud from whatever book they were working through, and the horses would graze peacefully in the fading light. On one such evening, when Clara was 7 and Samuel was 5, Miriam set down her brush and looked at Vincent. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in, fighting Henry, nearly going to jail for me. Do you ever think about how much simpler your life would have been if you had just looked away that day in Fort Yuma?" Vincent looked at his wife, at the peace and contentment in her face, at their children playing together, at the life they had built from nothing but courage and love. "Not even for a second," he said. She smiled and reached for his hand. "Good, because I would do it all again too. Every difficult moment, every frightening day, every risk we took. I would do it all again to end up right here, right now with you. Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. They showed me what I was capable of. They showed me that I was stronger than I thought I was." "You were always that strong," Vincent said. "You just needed the chance to prove it to yourself." As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in the colors Miriam loved to capture, Vincent thought about the man he had been when he first came to California. Lonely, careful, building walls around himself to avoid being hurt. And then a woman with hidden bruises had stepped off a stagecoach and everything had changed. He had looked at her and seen what others had ignored. He had not looked away. He had not pretended he saw nothing. And in that single act of acknowledgement, they had both found salvation. Years later, when Vincent was an old man and Miriam's hair had gone silver, they would sit together on that same porch and watch their grandchildren play where their children once had. And Miriam would paint, her hands still steady, still capturing the impossible beauty of the desert light. And Vincent would hold her hand and think about all the choices that had led them to this moment. The choice to care, the choice to act, the choice to risk everything for love. They were the best choices he had ever made.